Really quickly before we get into this video is of course inspired heavily by the Kill Count series by Dead Meat, which are excellent videos made by extremely talented people who I have nothing but respect and admiration for. The host James has said several times that anyone looking to make a Kill Count series about non-horror is more than welcome to, as it's not something he'd be interested in doing himself.
Here's a question from Natalia Rose. Would I ever give my blessing for others to do a similar video format like kill counts for other genres? Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I have no exclusive right to the concept of kill count. So anyone out there who wants to do a kill count for the Marvel movies, have at it, man.
With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video and know that it's coming from a place of admiration and not an attempt to copy completely. Greetings and welcome to the Superhero Kill Count. I'm your host Miles, and today we're going to be counting all the kills in 2008's Iron Man starring Robert Downey Jr. before he was the most famous man in the entire world. It goes without saying that Iron Man started a series of events that changed the landscape of cinema forever. Not only did it start the multi-decade project now known as the MCU, but it also came out at a time when superhero movies were starting to be seen as kind of a joke. Aside from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, superhero movies at the time were, well, a little bit well, they weren't particularly good, and you kind of laughed at them a lot more than you laughed with them. So what did Iron Man do that changed this perception? And more importantly, how many kills happened in the process? Well, let's find out and get to the count. The movie begins in Afghanistan, where Tony Stark, played by RDJ, is chilling in a Humvee with some soldiers, listening to AC/DC and sipping some whiskey. I wonder if they're having fun in there. It sure looks like it to me. They start off a little bit quiet, but eventually they're doing all sorts of fun stuff, like making jokes that have aged poorly and referring to social media websites that don't exist anymore.
No, you intimidate them.
Good God, you're a woman.
I'm an airman.
But you have actually excellent bone structure there. I'm kind of having a hard time not looking at you now. Is that weird? All right. I don't want to see this on your MySpace page.
Just as they're about to take a sweet snap and get a whole bunch of likes on MySpace, their convoy is attacked, and we get our first 9 kills for the count. The car in front of them gets immediately blown up, and judging by what we can see from the other cars, each one is carrying 3 soldiers. Our female airman is the next to go, along with the passenger soldier and Jimmy, all 3 of whom are shot. After this, we see 3 more soldiers in another car get gunned down as Tony makes his way out of the Humvee. He manages to avoid fire and takes cover behind a rock before using his very fancy looking phone to try and call for help. But before he can, he's blown up by one of his company's own missiles. When he comes to, he sees he's been taken hostage by a terrorist group known as the Ten Rings, and with a single hammer swing, we have our title card. Now, the Ten Rings in the comics are a much bigger operation and actually make proper appearances in Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings, 13 years later. In this movie, they're more of your average terrorist group, rather than a group of ninjas led by an immortal wielding magical rings that originally belonged to a dragon. It's crazy seeing how the MCU started off so relatively grounded and then delved much deeper into the magical and cosmic stuff later on. After the title card, we flash back 36 hours earlier to see Tony receive an award for engineering excellence by Colonel James Rhodes, played in this movie by Terrence Howard. Or we would if he bothered to turn up to accept it. Instead, Obadiah Stane, played by Jeff Bridges, a friend of Tony's father, Howard Stark, and now of Tony's, accepts it for him. Fun fact, when Stan Lee and co were creating Iron Man, one of the major inspirations was Howard Hughes, an American business magnate, pilot, engineer, film producer, philanthropist, and most importantly, defense contractor, who was known as one of the richest and most influential people in the world at the time. So in 1970, when the character of Tony's dad was being created, Howard was of course the perfect name. Meanwhile, Tony is at a casino table surrounded by women and his trusty bodyguard, Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau, who's pulling double duty as the movie's director. Just as they're going to leave, a reporter questions Tony about the ethics of the work he does and how he feels about the arms industry. In this scene, we learn a lot about Tony's character. He's the son of the richest military scientist in the world and has inherited his empire, where all he knows is how to build and sell weapons. He believes that powerful weapons in the hands of the US military is the best way to keep the world safe. But in the end, all he really cares about is the money. This is incredibly true to the comics, where Stan Lee challenged himself to make a character that fans should hate, but force them to like him. With the Cold War and Vietnam going on at the time, it made sense to make a hero who was a rich arms dealer. I think it's safe to say he succeeded in his challenge and created one of the most popular and important heroes that Marvel or the world has ever seen. After this conversation, he then promptly takes Miss Everett home for a extended interview. After a night of, I'm guessing, not much sleep, Ms. Everett is woken by Jarvis, Tony's AI, voiced by Paul Bettany. She has a little wander around before nearly being added to the kill count for this devastating burn by Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, pre-goop.
After all these years, Tony still has you picking up the dry cleaning.
I do anything and everything that Mr. Stark requires. including occasionally taking out the trash.
Meanwhile, Tony's on his way over to Afghanistan with Colonel James Rhodes and Happy Hogan. He's on his way over there to give a demonstration of the latest weapon from Stark Industries, the Jericho missile. After a demonstration that blew away the audience, Tony gets into the Humvee we saw at the start of the movie. Now, remind me, is it fun in there?
I'm sorry, this is the fun V.
Hey, I'd feel it would be. Now they're all caught up, Tony wakes up in a cave with a car battery hooked up to an electromagnet embedded in his chest. As explained by Yinsen, played by Sean Toob, this is to prevent metal shrapnel from the explosion from reaching his heart and killing him. We quickly find out that Tony isn't being kept here as a treasured guest, but instead as a forced labourer to build the terrorist group Jericho Missile. After some gentle discussion and seeing terrorists with their hands on so much of his equipment, Tony sets to work, but of course, not the missile. First, he creates the mini arc reactor to replace the magnet and car battery combo in his chest. In the original comics, the chest piece of the suit was the thing keeping him alive, meaning he always had to wear it under his clothes. This was later changed to the simple arc reactor for a more elegant and low-profile solution. Once this is done, they set to work on the Mark I Iron Man armour, all being made in a cave with a box of scraps. Isn't that neat? Just as they're getting finished, the 10 rings catch on to their plan and rush to stop them. The first 2 guards are blown up by a trap set on the door, giving us 2 more kills for the count. Yinsen goes to buy Tony some time with an assault rifle and loud noises, giving him enough time to power up the suit. 4 more guards make their way into the room and find Tony in the now fully operational Mark I suit. He takes each of them out with ease, knocking them around the room with reinforced punches. Now, I know it's questionable whether they die from this, but they go flying and the sound effects add a bit of crunch, so fuck it, why not? If I got punched in the chest by a giant metal man, I don't think I'd be feeling too hot. On his way out of the cave, he takes out 3 guards with clotheslines from hell that JBL himself would be proud of. By God. He crushes one guy against the door, and then another guy with that same door when it collapses. Then another guard even manages to kill himself with a ricochet off of Iron Man's helmet. Just before he gets out of the cave, he spots Yinsen, and he's not looking too great. Just as he moves towards him, Raza, the leader of the 10 rings, ambushes him with a grenade that misses by about 5 feet. Man, you really should have gone to marksman class, my guy. After dispatching him with a rocket, Tony makes his way over to Yinsen, and he is gravely wounded after getting caught by the guards during his time buying. He dies, reuniting with his family as he knew he would. Rest in peace, Yinsen. His stories of Stark weapons destroying this part of the world are really what progressed Tony as a character the most, and his death is the final push he needs to take on the 10 rings. After this, Tony goes sicko mode on the guards outside, spraying them with flamethrowers to scare them off and destroying their weapon stockpile. After his initial success, Tony gets pinned down by the guards and is forced to fly away just as the camp goes up in smoke. In this chaos, I believe we see about 15 guards either set on fire or blown up as a result of the fire, leaving nothing but a crater behind. After his successful escape and subsequent landing in the desert, he's picked up by Rhodey and makes his way back to the good old US of A. First things first, Burger King and a press conference. Now this is actually a neat little reference to how Burger King allegedly saved the life of Robert Downey Jr. He claims when he was younger and a drug addict, he went to Burger King and had a meal so bad it made him feel like something terrible was about to happen. So he threw away all his drugs and cleaned up his act from that moment on. I can't imagine that is the celebrity endorsement that Burger King wanted, but it is the one they got. Burger King, for when you need a wake-up call. At the press conference, Tony shuts down the weapons division of his company after seeing that this technology isn't just being used to defend his country, but also to attack it. And this is what I love about Iron Man and why he's one of my favourite heroes. Tony isn't transformed into Iron Man by the reactor in his chest or the suit. He's transformed by his time in the cave, learning what his weapons are being used for and who is using them. His entire worldview changes once he learns that he's feeding into all this hurt, and it then becomes his life's mission to try and make it right however he can. Iron Man isn't the suit, it's the man underneath. And just like how Bruce Wayne was always Batman from the moment his parents were murdered, Tony is Iron Man from the moment he decides to stop making weapons. Obadiah isn't best pleased by this result, but seems really interested in Tony's chest reactor. Maybe a little bit too interested? Later when he's back home, Tony gets Pepper to help him swap out the reactor for a new and improved one that wasn't made in a cave with a box of scraps. This effect was actually done practically, with Robert Downey Jr.'s real torso going down into the seat and the fake torso being placed on top to allow Pepper to stick her hands in there. The special effects team on this movie did a great job, especially for 2008, and this is an especially brilliant practical example of that. Now he's back to full HP, Tony sets to work improving his suit design and begins working on the Mark II armor. Now, it doesn't go great to start off with, but one of Tony's greatest powers is learning from his mistakes, and every time he fails, it gets a little bit close to something actually usable, and before you know it, he He takes a completed Mark II suit out for a spin, and after a mostly successful test of only the slight icing issue, he lands gracefully, through 2 floors and a car. Meanwhile, Raza, who survived the rockets, there was no kill graphic, so you really should have known. He's scavenging the Mark I from the desert, and he doesn't look too pleased about Tony escaping and taking half of the skin in his head with him. After the Mark II test, Tony modifies the design to prevent icing at high altitudes by using a gold titanium alloy, giving the suit a gold colour. He tosses in a little hot rod red for some added subtlety, and the iconic Mark III suit is sent to print whilst he heads out for the night. In the comics, he actually wore an all-gold suit for a while after painting it to literally look like a knight in shining armour. He later switched out to the red and gold suit a little bit later when he wanted to cut down on some weight and make everything more manoeuvrable. He heads to the event and says hi to Stan Lee before going in. Inside, he meets Agent Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, from the, what was it again?
Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division.
Yeah, that. They want to talk to him about his escape and what he used to do it. Seems like everyone is really interested in that suit. He then goes to dance with Pepper and engage in some excellent employer-employee relationship building. After some dancing, conversation, and closeness enough to make any HR department sweat, Tony heads to the bar to get himself something to take the edge off. Here, Miss Everhart, the reporter from earlier, finds him and shows him pictures of Gulmira, the hometown of Yinsen, now in ruins from the Ten Rings using Stark weapons, including his shiny new Jericho missile. Who could have given them that? When he questions Obadiah about this, he all but tells Tony he's the one dealing with terrorists and plans to lock Tony out of the company so he can keep doing it. Oh. Well, the mystery was good while it lasted, I suppose. Tony is pissed and suits up in the Mark III for the first time to take on the Ten Rings himself and liberate Gulmira, where people are being rounded up and killed left, right, and centre. But we only see 3 people get gunned down off screen after they run into a building. Tony lands in the middle of a raid, and it's putting it lightly to say that he absolutely fucks these guys up. The first guy is punched in the gut so hard he goes flying at least 15 feet into the air. The rest are taken out with repulsor blasts and these fancy seeker darts. When all is said and done, 9 Ten Rings guards are dead. But wasn't there 10 of these guys? Hey, there he is! While Tony doesn't kill him here, it's doubtful he survives what the village does to him, but we don't get to see any of that, so he'll have to stay off the count. On his way to track down the remaining weapons, he's shot down by a tank, but just shrugs it off before blowing it up with a wrist rocket. You gotta watch out for those. Now, we don't see anyone killed in the tank, but someone has to be driving it. According to Google, a tank team has at least 3 people in modern tank, so that's what we're gonna have to count. After that brief interlude, he finally finds the missiles and blows them up, taking what looks like 7 Ten Ring soldiers with it. With that, his work is done, so he sets off to fly his way home, but the US government sees him flying in a no-fly zone and wants to know who or what he is. The US government getting involved in a conflict outside of their territory? What an outlandish thing to suggest. After being shot down by a couple of fighter jets, he gives Rhodey a call and tells him he's in the suit to try and call him off, but it's no good. Also, fun fact, one of the analysts in this scene is played by Joshua Harto, who in the same year was threatening to reveal another hero's identity in The Dark Knight. One of the jets manages to crash into Tony, taking off a wing and sending the pilot falling to the ground with a jammed parachute. Just before he gets too low, Tony manages to catch up to him and deploy the chute and get away before anyone else starts shooting him. I guess the other pilot must have just saw this happen and let him go then. Oh well, as long as nobody got hurt, we can put this all down as a training exercise.
An unfortunate training exercise involving an F-22 Raptor occurred yesterday.
Hey, would you look at that? Back in Raz's camp, we see Obadiah arrive, confirming what we already knew, he's working with the terrorists, and was even the one behind the attack on Tony's convoy, which should have resulted in his death. After a brief chat inside where Obadiah takes the Mark I armor and plans, he paralyzes Raza with this tiny buzzing device and leaves him frozen to the spot. Back outside, we see Obadiah's men have rounded up all of Raza's and are ordered to take them all out. That's 20 more kills to the count if you include Raza, which I would say you should since it's doubtful he'd be left alive after this. Back in Malibu, Tony sends Pepper to steal some files from the Stark Industries server, and while she's scanning, she finds plans for a larger Mark I suit, as well as the video the Ten Rings took of Tony when they first captured him. Also, she finds these files in folders called Top Secret and Ultra Secret. God forbid she finds a homework folder, or she'll be in for a nasty surprise. Just as she's finishing copying everything, Obadiah shows up and edges his way towards the desk as the files keep copying. At the last second, Pepper turns on the screensaver to hide her work and manages to get away just before he sees what she's been doing. He then heads to the lab for an update and is told that the chest-mounted arc reactor is impossible, and he doesn't take the news well. After all,
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps!
Yeah, I've been saying that this whole time. Back at Tony's house, he picks up a call from Pepper, but is paralysed by Obadiah with that little doohickey from earlier. He gives him the evil speech routine and steals the reactor from Tony's chest, leaving him to die. Once Tony can move, he gets back down to his workshop to try and get his hands on his last hope, the original reactor. Pepper had gifted him this earlier as a reminder that he has a heart. Oh, isn't that nice? Just as he collapses shy of the reactor, his handy friend gives him panned, and passes him the reactor, keeping him alive, but not for long. Once he's suited up, Jarvis tells him he only has enough juice to power the suit for a short while, so he's going to need to wrap this one up quickly. Just after he leaves, Rhodey sees the Mark II silver suit and feels strangely drawn to it for some reason.
Next time, baby.
Yeah, next time. But not for you, buddy. Meanwhile, at Stark Industries, Pepper, Coulson, and 5 other agents head into Obadiah's lab to bring him in. After a bit of poking around, Pepper spots him lurking in the shadows and sprints out of there at high speed for someone in heels. On his way out, Obadiah takes out 3 of the agents with massive punches. Just as he corners Pepper, Tony flies in and tackles him, sending the two onto the highway. After saving them being run over by the least thankful family in America, Tony gets beat up for a while, but in all the chaos, we still don't see anyone lose a life. Knowing that Obadiah won't have done as much testing as he has, he takes the fight to the sky, running his reactor to the edge of its power capacity, but he just about manages to force Obadiah to freeze up and fall back to Earth. Tony just about lands on the last drips of power and begins taking off the suit to reduce consumption. But would you believe it? Stain is back. Man, it's just like something that you can't get rid of. If only I could think of a word for that. Working with no power, a severely damaged suit, and 1 glove, he keeps stalling whilst getting Pepper to send the reactor below into a meltdown to blow up the roof and take out Obadiah once and for all. Just in time, she finally hits the button and sends Tony flying away to relative safety and shocks Obadiah so much he looks like he's going back to 1955. For good measure, he then falls into the reactor, exploding himself and most of the building, but luckily leaving Tony unharmed, with just a flicker of life left in his chest. Somehow the next day, he's looking just fine and about to read a statement clearing himself of any suspicion about being this Iron Man character, as ordered by Agent Coulson. Remind me, where was he from again?
Just call us S.H.I.E.L.D.
Hey, that is much catchier, Coulson. Nice work. After a little more office romance, he heads to make his statement, and of course, Tony being Tony, he can't do what he's told and announces to the world the truth. And what is that truth?
Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Just before we can go home, we have a little post-credits scene with this guy called Nick Fury talking about something called the Avengers Initiative. Man, I wonder what that's all about. So how many people died in Iron Man? And how many of them were at the hand of our hero? Let's get to the numbers and find out. But first, let me get dressed so I can make my way out of this cave somehow. I'll be right back. Whoa, that thing's got some zip. By my count, 83 people died in Iron Man. With 64 male, 1 female, and 21 of unknown gender, that gives us a mostly blue pie. And to start out the MCU, our hero was responsible for 49 of the kills, whereas the villain was only directly responsible for 3, making the start of our leaderboard look a little bit dominating for the man in red. The Platinum Puncher for the coolest kill has to go to the 9 Rings guard that Tony punches into the air. Every time I see him fly, I enjoy it more. The Broken Bone Claws for worst kill can go to the 2010 Rings members shot off screen by Obadiah's men. They make up nearly a quarter of this count all in one go, and we don't see a single one of them. Finally, the Seal of Worthiness for the most heroic moment has to go to saving the pilot from falling to his death. Tony got hit by a jet, and still has one in his tail trying to shoot him, and he still manages to pop the chute and save a life, all in his first real outing as a hero. Next time we have the Hulk, so if you want to see just how many people the big green anger machine takes out, subscribe to the channel to catch the next video. That's all from me on today's kill count. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.